Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm LaShawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching. Hello, everyone. We are back from a break that we took for the Memorial Day weekend, and we are back in the journal, our guided journal, Coaching Nuggets of Wisdom to Inspire, Explore, Act, Flourish, a guided journal to live your best life. Those of you who have followed us along know that we have finished the first section, which is Inspire. And now we're on the second section, which is Explore. And this prompt is about inspiration, which is really interesting because we had the section on Inspire. But now we're looking at inspiration from the lens of exploration. So exploring inspiration. I will read the prompt and then Eryn and I will discuss what comes up for us. Find inspiration in your daily life. Feel what feelings are involved. Notice what is happening that has fostered inspiration. Sometimes noticing the smallest things helps you notice the biggest things in your life. Inspiration is all around us, and depending on our own state of well-being, inspiration may look different for you. Even within a day, exploring inspiration can be a powerful tool for healing. When was the last time you were inspired? What feelings did you notice? Write those feelings down. Now, take some time today to find inspiration or let it come to you. What is fostering this inspiration for you? How are you feeling? How does that relate to your past feelings of inspiration? Now, what's coming up for me as I'm reading this is I wonder how many times we use the word feeling in this prompt because it's all over the place. But I think that's really important because our emotions are information. The feelings that we feel are information about the state of our well-being. If you consider this as a kind of a thermometer or barometer for where you are in your own alignment with your well-being. So if you are feeling irritated or overwhelmed, sad, despairing, that is information that your well-being is a little off, like you are not aligned with your well-being. On the flip side, our feelings of excitement, elation, contentment, curiosity are signs that we're aligned with our well-being, that we are in a good place. So what's interesting about this, and something that stuck out for me, was the second line in the paragraph. Inspiration is all around us, and depending on our own state of well-being, inspiration may look different for you, even within a day. Because our emotions, our moods, our feelings are a lot like weather, and they can change from minute to minute, hour to hour, depending on how we are aligning with our well-being. So that's something that really stuck out for me in this, is the connection between what we are feeling and well-being. And then another piece of that is inspiration. I'm really still kind of processing that because I'm thinking about where that fits in. So as I'm talking about this right now, I'm thinking we've got feelings. I get that. I get the point of feelings. To me, it's an indication of where I am on my well-being. Am I close? Am I aligned with my well-being? Because I see well-being as a constant state and that we can tap into, that it's always there, and we have the capability to tap into it at any point. We have to be in the right mindset, and we have to be allowing in order for that well-being to be experienced. The well-being is there, but we can be cut off from it. And that's information. So it's not good or bad. It's just kind of the state that we're in. So I understand that, and I understand well-being. And now I'm trying to think about inspiration. So when I think about inspiration, I think about that feeling of connection that comes when we are engaged with something that piques our interest, or that brings an idea or a belief or a value at the forefront, kind of makes us aware of that. The other day, we were doing a work day. We were working with plants and trees at the nonprofit where I work, Family Learning Center. And I was inspired by the plants that I was working with and learning about how you prepare the plant for to transplant it into the soil or into another place. So it comes out of the pot and goes into the ground. And one thing that I learned during the workday was the roots grow in a circle. I'm losing the words here, but they grow in a circle around the pot. They don't have enough space to spread out, so they grow in a circle around the pot, and they can actually strangle the plant if it's left in the pot too long, because it needs to branch out or spread out. It needs to spread out. So what they do, this is interesting. What they do is they take the plant out of the pot and they score the roots. So they actually cut the roots so that they aren't in that circle that they're in. And then sometimes they call it bare rooting, where they dip the roots in water. So they take out all that nutrient, all that wonderful, yummy soil that it was in the plant or in the pot, sorry, that it was in the pot, so that it will kind of coax it or force it to spread out and grow in the ground where it's going to be transplanted. So I was not aware of this. Gardening is not in my wheelhouse. But this experience that I had with the plants showed up in a conversation that I had with a friend. I was talking to this friend, we met for dinner, and I was talking to them about my son. And during that conversation, the image of the bound up roots came into my mind. And that is what inspiration felt like to me. The image of the bound up roots and the new information that I got about that, and how roots have a tendency to make a circle and then they can even strangle. It's even detrimental to the plant for it to grow like that. And I was thinking about constraints in my son's life. And I was thinking about we're exploring the idea of homeschooling because he's floundering in public school. And my initial reaction to that was, no, we shouldn't do that. But then all of a sudden, in this conversation I was having with my friend, the image of the roots strangling themselves and the need to wash away what would normally be a very nutrient rich, wonderful place to grow, but what is actually detrimental to the plant, washing that away, that to me was like, it inspired me to consider the homeschooling. And I don't know, that's a pretty roundabout way of explaining inspiration, but that's what's coming up for me right now when I'm thinking about these three things: feelings, well-being, and inspiration. What's coming up for you, Eryn?
I love that with all of those. There's so much there because I took a few notes and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, where do I want to really focus? Because a lot of what you said resonated a lot with me. And I think that last piece on inspiration, one of the things that I gathered from that beautiful metaphor of the roots is perspective shifting, right? Inspiration can help us perspective shift. So we don't necessarily have to be in the best place or feeling happy. We can have maybe some more difficult emotions and still find inspiration that can lead to some perspective shifting around it. And so that's kind of one of the things that really came up for me, is both in your example, but just personally too. Anytime I find inspiration, it's often accompanied by me shifting my perspective about something, which is so beautiful and so necessary for me to keep growing and changing in that way. So I really like that. And then how you talked about, we use the word feel or feelings a lot in this prompt. And I think that inspiration evokes just feeling, and it's a good reminder of being connected to our feelings. And in this second section of the journal on exploring our own way of being, this prompt hits that theme so well, because it helps us explore our own way of being in the world around how we feel about things and what that means for how we show up in the world, and how we embody what we are inspired by around us. And so I really liked that as well. And then what was interesting, because, I grew up where my high school English teachers like, never use things, never use bad, never use good in sentences. You need to use more effective language, et cetera, et cetera. And yet that sentence really struck out to me, the one with the things and good and bad. So it's sometimes noticing the smallest things help you notice the biggest things in your life. I think that sentence for me captures inspiration so poignantly. And noticing, the small, like when you think of roots of a flower or whatever being very small, right? That is something that helps you notice this bigger theme with your son that you talked about, right? And I've been finding inspiration a lot lately because I've kind of been up and down emotionally, struggling with a few things. And I'm like, okay, maybe gratitude hasn't been helping as much, although it can be helpful, and has been helpful. But when I go to inspiration, I find a different level of helpfulness. So, I listening to the lead diver of the his interview for the cave rescue, just the selflessness and the fortitude and all of those things I found so inspiring. And then here in Colorado, a girl got really sick from a rattlesnake, and hearing the doctors talk about what they did, like it just the inspiration behind that. And those seem like really big examples. And sometimes we don't need those really big examples, right? And for inspiration in our own lives. But on the other end of it, I could feel into what it is I was feeling when I was listening to those stories, those two stories in general. And what I was feeling was gratitude. It led me to gratitude. It led me to a sense of awe and wonder, a sense of humility. It really opened me up this way. And so I think that inspiration has a lot more to it than it just being this positive thing, right? Just this positive phrase. And then I will say we had a guest speaker yesterday, and he is dealing with his wife's cancer diagnosis that's been quite challenging and very difficult. And it's funny because he added in inspiration. And sometimes inspiration can be in what we do as well. So maybe that for him, he's a runner and a cyclist, which is what you'd expect in Boulder County, right? Like, I am not a cyclist and am trying to run again. But anyway, his inspiration from those physical sources of movement, and talking about that and tying that back into how we engage our communities from a sense of love and openness rather than gatekeeping. And that was a really powerful message that he gave, because it tied to today's passage really well. But just the powerful healing components of inspiration have been showing up in my own life this week. And this is just me kind of surface level, not even going deep with them, reflecting on those and how helpful they've been to my well-being and my ability to then support others as well. So I think inspiration hasn't had enough of its time, right? We hear gratitude, we hear all these other phrases, but this feels really aligned to me.
And I love that you're bringing in the ideas around like the feelings around inspiration, and what that feels like, and also the source of inspiration. It doesn't necessarily have to be like something that's like, see, now I don't want to say good.
That's okay. Go for it.
That's
It's
all right.
helpful.
I had the same like thing with descriptive language, right? Don't use always, don't use good, don't use bad. Be more descriptive. Yeah. I'm there with you. But just pleasant emotions, emotions that feel better than other emotions. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's where inspiration comes from. And I love that you brought in the idea of activity, movement, motion, and how that can also bring about inspiration. And as you were talking, I was like, I really want to go back and look at the definition of inspire or inspiration. And I did look at it, and from the Oxford English Dictionary, we have inspire. So if we just take the verb inspire, it's fill someone with the urge or ability to do or feel something, especially to do something creative. And
Mm.
then the second is breathe in, inhale, which is interesting. So those two different definitions of inspire. And then if we look at, just the idea of what we were talking about as the urge, that is something I sticks out to me, urge, because when I think about inspiration, there definitely is an urge to do, an urge to change, an urge to feel a certain way. And I think that really, for me, embodies what inspiration feels like. It is an urge. It's like a push. It's like a light bulb going off, or for like there's something forward moving about inspiration for me. And also that, and going back to what you said, Eryn, about gratitude, definitely that's part of it. One thing that I think about when I listen to, and that's interesting, you're talking about the different stories that you listen to, the story of the girl who got bit by a rattlesnake, the story of, was it, what was the other one? Was it doctors? No, 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 it was explorers.
The cave dive, the rescue crew for the cave in Laos. Yeah.
Yes. So the rescue crew, hearing their stories of courage, fortitude was a word you used, Eryn,
Yeah.
can urge us to want to do that ourselves, or urge us to appreciate our lives or appreciate the things that are possible in life. I think that has a lot to do with inspiration as well. Awareness of possibilities and opportunity. That's one thing that comes up for me when I think about inspire, inspiration, possibility, opportunity, opening up. How about you, Eryn? What comes up for you when you think of the word inspire and the word inspiration?
Some of the words you were using really reminded me a lot of the coach training I've had in my past. So like you have forward motion and appreciating what's possible, opportunities to open up. Like these seem to be classic things that we do in coaching by tapping into people's wisdom and inner understanding and allowing that to guide the process, but it not just existing there. There is a level of, okay, so how do we enact that in the physical world? How do we help you move forward in a way that feels aligned? And so it's interesting because I know sometimes people are like, well, coaching is too forward movement or coaching's not enough, like it's just kind of all over the place. But I think that that is one of the things that sets coaching apart as its distinct profession is that forward movement. And it doesn't need to be forced. And it's not like, it has to be fast or anything like that. But I think there are opportunity points in people's lives. And I know there has been in my lives where certain things have been said to me at the right time, or I went through a coaching session and I had a huge perspective shift and I made a change. Those moments to move me forward were highly necessary and I had to be open to them. I had to open up to them. And at first maybe I wasn't as open, but there had to be a little bit of something, a little bit of a recognition that I wanted to shift or make a change or whatever it may be. And so that's what I love about like the art of coaching and with people is those little openings that kind of lead them to this forward motion. And it's not forced, but if we were to do that on our own without that reflective practice of coaching, I think it makes it that much more challenging, that less intentional, and then kind of and less aligned often. I mean, we can go through life, right? And change will happen to us. But I think that for us to embody the change that we want and need, it requires that reflective practice that coaching offers. So when you were talking, that's what really came up for me with that and that appreciation of what is possible. That sounds so entrepreneurial, which I love, but it also sounds so coaching too, that we can appreciate what is possible by opening up to inspiration, right? And that's why in this journal, I think this second section on exploring our way of being, when we can really sit with these kind of deeper feelings around our own ways of being and what we are open to and where inspiration is showing up, I think that can be really helpful. And even just a small inventory, whether that's going to before you go to bed or at breakfast, that can be helpful. I have been more recently trying to do more with the gratitude space because that's a space I challenge and I'm challenged by sometimes. But I think the inspiration space is what has led me to get to that point. So inspiration is, I think, accessible to all because we can always find wonder or awe in something or someone or a story or a piece of art, something much bigger than ourselves. And that's what inspiration opens us up to. And that then can lead to the appreciation of what is possible, the appreciation to try something a little bit different, to say, okay, I'm ready to make a change, those sorts of things. And so I really love the words you use. So just to summarize, you mentioned, forward motion and appreciate the possibility in life, those types of things, and the opportunities of opening up. That sounds really good. So I guess I feel like there's some level of question here in terms of it sounds like you're in the exploration phase because through the inspiration of this plant of your son's academic journey. And so as you're in that phase, what else is coming up for you? And maybe that's too personal. But yeah.
And is anything too personal for this, for our
Okay.
conversations? Do we ever not get personal? No, I think that's a really good question. I want to also speak to another thing that's coming up for me. You mentioned gratitude. Another thing that's coming up for me related to inspiration is hope.
Mhm.
And especially because we're using the phrase opening up to. And I feel like that is a feeling that comes with hope, opening up to, rising up to, being aware of the light at the end of the tunnel. That's very cliche. But anyway, one thing that I would say though, related to your question about my son's academic journey, the inspiration that came from the image of the plant and the roots and what I learned about the roots and how maybe it wasn't so much my son, maybe it was really myself, that there was self-awareness that was the result of that just kind of spark of inspiration when I was talking to my friend about my son's journey and how he was struggling in school. And I was talking about the constraints, but then I realized now as we're talking that the roots in the pot, like in the soil that they're in the pot, is very nutrient rich. And so the plant has a tendency to want to stay in that soil. So even if you transplant it into the ground, it'll stay in that bundled state because it wants to stay in that nutrient rich soil that it was in the pot, but it's not good for it. So what the gardeners do is they dip the roots in water to get rid of that nutrient soil, which is counterintuitive to me. Because I'm like, why would you take away the nutrient soil from the plant and put it in less nutrient soil? And their explanation was, if you don't do that, it'll stay in the soil that it was in the pot and it will die because it's going to strangle itself and it needs to spread out. And I was thinking that's very similar to my rigid sense of education, that I feel like it's safer if my kids are in a structured public school system and we should just work within that system. It's like me, the way that I am, even though all evidence has been to the contrary. This is not good for my kids. My conditioning, just like those roots in the soil in the pot, is that we should just work with the system. But if it's not working, if it's a system that's not nurturing to my children, then I need to spread out. So I need to like kind of my roots, my thinking needs to be washed. I need to unlearn what I've learned about schooling and what I've learned about that this is the best way to do it. So that's something that I'm thinking about in this inspiration to go further and realize that I myself need to change my perspective, broaden my thinking about what is possible in education. And can my son thrive? Is it possible if we just take a risk or we do this new thing? Is it possible that he could thrive if I just allow myself to acclimate to a new way of looking at education, a new way of looking at learning? And in very much the same way that a bare root plant would be put into the ground, roots they spread out to get the nutrients. So the roots would then be forced, in other words, to look for nutrients in its new environment. So that's kind of what's coming up for me. And I don't even know if that answered your question, Eryn.
No, I mean, I think it's really a good example of how coaching conversations happen because it's like I just ask a question and we see where it takes us. And then it makes me more curious about, okay, so there's that option. What are all the other options? And, like, how do we partner with our clients to help them figure out what's best for them?
Yeah,
And I love that because it's kind of what you're trying to do with your son in a way.
mhm,
It's coaching is such a, there's not a power there should not be a power dynamic, right? Whereas
right.
oftentimes when we go to the doctor or somewhere else, they're the expert, we want to make sure that we listen to them, that sort of thing. But that's why coaching is this unique space because there's the professionality of it. Is that even a word, professionality? And there's like specific training that's grounded in both science and spirituality and other research. But on the other end of it, it's this practice of supporting one another through equilibrium, through curiosity, where there isn't this like, she's the expert, I'm not. And so I really like how what you said really showcases what can go on in a coaching session as well. And then also like the meta part of that too, and how you're applying that to your own life with your son as well. So I found that quite compelling for coaching concepts. And then the other thing I'm thinking about too is the thing that the sequencing that you have where you said inspiration. Well, we talked about inspiration leading to gratitude, which leads to hope. And then what, right? That opens us up to even more. And I think this is where action comes in, which leads to then taking action. And I know that can't be rushed. And sometimes it shouldn't be about taking action for maybe even a few years, right? Or being really reflective on something and taking a lifetime before you take action, but that's the other thing that coaching offers with taking action, because once you get to that phase with a coaching partner, that then you get to have very structured models for, okay, how do I take action now that I have found this hope? It needs to be small, right? It needs to be something that I'll do. It needs to be have some sort of a trigger in my system, whether that's in my calendar and all these other ways. And it needs to be something that is attainable. And I have to admit, I'm working on this project with um, a seniors aging solo project, but I'm trying to not go into that because that's not the key part that I'm trying to highlight here. The part about it though is I am being drawn in by this woman who knows how to take contemplative, inspired action. And I reflected about this the other day because I felt like I was still very much in this phase of, which maybe needed to be, meeting with this aging person and really just kind of being a sounding board and and compassionately and with curiosity and doing that, which wasn't leading to some of the healing components that really needed to happen. And so it's like, okay, how do I take action maybe a little bit quicker sometimes And then sometimes I take action too quickly on other things. So like there is this kind of back and forth, right? And it's like we don't want to get stuck in decision fatigue, and that's what coaching offers. It helps us not get stuck in the process of decision fatigue, but it also helps us be very considerate about all the different aspects of one's life, what's going on, and what that means, and where to move forward and where to pause and those sorts of things. And I think that's the other thing that I personally need to remember, as well as some of the people that I work with, even in grief. It's like, okay, if we do move forward here, maybe we need to get rid of something over here. Or if we do move forward in this way, then this is going to completely change your schedule. And how does that work? And so, like, those things that we can really think through can be another really helpful reminder that action, it doesn't have to be like this forced, overly planned thing, but it needs to be thoughtful. And I have found through coaching that I get that the most rather than any other modality. And I like other modalities. I like my counselor. I like other things, but I don't get that. This is what makes coaching special, I think. And so I really appreciate that. So by exploring one's way of being, by sitting with that, that leads to, that gratitude, hope, and inspired action, where that action is much more thoughtful and aligned. So I think that's the other thing I wanted to add in there.
I think the action piece is so important. And I also feel like action is seems to be a natural progression from hope. My experience has been when I feel hopeful, I want to act, and I feel more confident in the action. When I feel hopeful, I feel like this action can be impactful and meaningful and purposeful. With that hope, I'm able to move. And that feeling of despair is one of, for me personally, is one where you don't move, where there doesn't seem to be a way forward. And when hope comes in, it's like, oh, there's a way forward. I can go, I can do, I can make a difference. That is the experience that I have when I feel hopeful. So I think the action piece is almost like a natural progression from gratitude, hope, inspiration. Like inspiration, if I go back to that definition that I shared at the beginning, there is within the definition the expectation of action, or the result would be action. So I think that action is part of that. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Eryn. And like you said, it doesn't have to be right away. It doesn't have to be immediate action. Inspired action often it can be quick and like very laser focused, and you know exactly what you need to do and you do it. There's also the process of starting and stopping and starting and stopping. So, for example, going back to my own personal experience with the inspiration to consider an alternative way to educate my child. That's the first step, the consideration itself. So, okay, I'm open to and I'm receptive of the idea of an alternative way to educate my child. That's the beginning. So let's say I delve into that. I delve into alternative ways, and something comes up that seems daunting or challenging or scary. I'm going to go through that process again. Maybe I'll have a conversation with someone about it, or I'll come across a book or something, or a podcast or something. And that will then inspire me to take that next step. So it's not like it's a one and done thing. It is an ongoing process. It's not linear. It's not like you're going to just keep going up. You might go down. You might find that you're in
Yes.
a state of mind of like despair. And then you'll have to, begin again. Or maybe there might be, some drawbacks to some things. And that's just part of the process. So I think it's important to be mindful of the fact that this is messy. that it's not going to be all straight lines and, oh, I've got the inspiration and it's going to
Right?
be smooth sailing from now on. It rarely ever is. So that's something also to keep in mind. I think action
Yes.
is definitely part of it.
I am so grateful you added that in because it's so true. It's it's never linear.
Right. Rarely linear.
Yeah, okay, maybe rarely. There are maybe some, but I yeah.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot. This I love this prompt because there's so many, as has been the case with a lot of prompts in this journal. There's so many layers and so many avenues that you can take. And there are places where you can stop and reflect, and there's places where you can act, and there's places where you can have, show gratitude or experience that appreciation for what is and the appreciation of what is to come. So there's so much here that you can explore in this prompt.
I love how you added explore. You can explore in this prompt. So yeah, that's a good segue into our our call to
Call to
action
action, yeah.
based off of all these summaries of our coaching nuggets of wisdom. But yes, a call to action for me today is just surrender to the awe around you. And sometimes it's not even noticeable until you are intentional about that surrender. So try today, if you're on a walk or at your work or with your family or whatever you're doing, to close your eyes, take some moments to breathe, and surrender into what feels inspiring.
I love that. So my call to action is about action. And I love that Eryn brought in the action piece. And I would like to I encourage our listeners to lean into that, lean into action. When you are called or inspired or feel moved to act, what's happening around that? What exists that makes that possible? And again, I'm going to go back to that F word, the feelings. What are the feelings around action? Explore that. Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm LaShawn with Mayshell's Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.